And we got
I'd like to
Alex from
try.
WorldCoin in the studio. Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
What's going on?
Tools for Humanity, founder of Tools for Humanity. Sorry, WorldCoin is one of the coins in the world, the orb. There's a whole ontology of
Yes.
technology here. But thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm just at the Andreessen Horowitz LP Day,
Oh,
which
cool. Yeah,
I
we
think
were
Did you
calling
just
in
get off?
yesterday.
You just got off stage?
I literally just got off stage.
Oh,
So I almost was a little too late, but yeah, right now in Las Vegas. First time in Las Vegas, so I'm really
really?
excited to be here.
Wow. Narrative violation.
Yeah.
Somebody building in crypto that hasn't been to a crypto conference in Vegas.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, it's great to have you. We've been wanting to have you on the show for a while.
Yeah, that's great.
Glad we made it happen. And it times nicely with your guys' entrance into the U.S. market in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you should kick us off with kind of like an overview of where the company is, where you started. I know there was an international component. Now you're in the U.S. There's different products. There's different ways to interact with like the overall ecosystem. Kind of give us the state of the union on Tools for Humanity.
Yeah. So maybe starting right from the beginning. So like a little over 5 years ago now, 5.5 years ago, Sam Altman from OpenAI and actually had part of the initial idea of this. And we met. I was in AI before as well. I was in theoretical physics and deep learning. And so both of us believed that AI will continue to make a lot of progress, and very likely we will see AGI within our lifetime, which back then was not like a common thing to say.
Yeah.
And of course, like both of us believe that this is mostly going to be a tremendous force for good, and it's going to drastically accelerate science and technology, but also that we will need global scale infrastructure to kind of really make this a great outcome for everyone. And so we started a company together called Tools for Humanity that really had that as a mission, is like build global scale infrastructure to help with that. And then the actual kind of coming together of the company, there were two main ideas. One was around the fact that as AI continues to make progress, we will need some form of proof of human that is at internet scale. Otherwise, many of the things that we care about will start breaking down because obviously, like as a society, we form our opinions on the internet, on our social networks. We meet each other on platforms like dating apps. We entertain each other with games that we play with each other through the internet. And like the moment we have not only passed the Turing test, which I think we did in the last 2 years, meaning now we have AI systems that we can talk to, and we cannot tell anymore just by talking to them that in fact is an AI, but also that we are now about to enter, of course, like strong agentic AI systems, real-time video generation, all these kinds of things. And so we will need a proof of human at internet scale. Otherwise, social networks, many of the places where we meet online, et cetera, will start breaking down. And so this was idea number one. It's like, how could you build such a system? And once you have built such a system, you can use that to launch a digital token by giving ownership in it to eventually every human. And as a result, you would create what will turn out to be the largest real human network on the internet. And so it was a very humble vision
Quite.
by Sam. And so we really we took it very seriously. We thought about it for a long time. And back then really thought about how would you need to build such a proof of human. If you assume what we did, which is that AI will become increasingly better. And then many of the initial ideas you could have on how to build such a system, like why don't we just use our online reputation? So like our accounts that we used in the past, we built some kind of reputation graph. Or what about if we just rely on government identity systems? Or what if we just use phone cameras to get some kind of signal? All of these we realized pretty quickly will either just break down as a result of AI becoming more more powerful and better, or it just doesn't have the properties that we think such a system will need, which is it needs to be global and it needs to be fully anonymous and privacy preserving, all of those things. And so, well, back then we realized we will likely have to build a physical hardware device that we have to distribute all over the world, and at some point get almost anyone that uses the internet to verify with such a hardware device, and that everything else will very likely break down. And that was like a very, very crazy thing to do 5 years ago. So like people mocked the company for a long time, and it yeah, it was like just a crazy thing to work on for quite a while. And so essentially,
Talk about just going deeper there. You guys went to market internationally first. I'm sure you had a lot of temptation to really focus in San Francisco early on, right? This is
right.
an area where there's an extreme density of people that understand this broader vision that you guys have. So I'm curious, like thinking about, the decisions that went into that go to market, and then also giving our audience a sense of the scale of the operation, because I don't think people fully process just how
Yeah.
large the operation is.
So first to the first part of the question, which is why did we not launch the United States much earlier? That had a simple reason that because Sam is a co-founder, everything we do has like a lot of visibility usually. And in the last administration, there was basically no regulatory clarity around how
Mm.
to behave uh, as you build these crypto networks and kind of what are the things that are allowed, which are the things that are not allowed. And SEC, of course, like had a posture of enforcement. And so given the large visibility of the project, we just took everything always through a very cautious lens and just decided that we will only enter the US once there is a clear path to regulatory clarity, which I think is now the case. And so now we're really excited to kind of make the service available. We launched 2 weeks ago in the US. In the US itself, it's still a kind of pretty small operation. It's going to take us a couple months to really ramp this up. And just to give you an overall sense, we're now at 20, 25, 26 million users in total in our app, World App, which is essentially the initial client to make this network useful. But kind of you have to think about that there's going to be many clients that will use this network, but still. And then we have 12 million people that actually are verified, really all over the world, from South Korea, Japan, to Europe, to Latin America, and so yeah, the company is now around 400 or 500 people, so Tools for Humanity, and it's a pretty complicated thing to manage because you have everything from on the ground operations that are somewhat complicated, and a lot of things can go wrong to, of course, hardware manufacturing and ramp up to a lot of software. So it's been quite a journey.
What is your background? Have you done crypto stuff before, or hardware stuff before, or managed huge like workforces before? Because you're doing a lot of stuff, and I'm wondering like
No, I
how
was
does one.
I was literally a theoretical physicist. So just
That's awesome.
I used to sit at a desk all day and do math and write code.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
I did decent amount of software engineering just because like already
Yeah,
back then the clusters got larger, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I didn't do any of that.
Okay,
And
I
So
want to
talk
talk.
about,
Yeah.
talk about how, basically talk about bootstrapping the network and
Mm.
the user base with the token, right? And because that's, I think I have a good sense for why you would do that, but the sort of boomer pushback would be, why does this need to be, crypto? And I think you
yeah,
guys have good reasons for that.
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's two reasons for that. Like, first of all, of course, appreciating that crypto still has like a meaningfully bad reputation, just given
Mhm.
everything that happened. But I think there's like real technological reasons of why you need to do, or why I think it's best to build such a platform that way. So one is, as you just mentioned, bootstrapping, where all of these networks that we use, of course, they're absolutely meaningless if they're not at scale. And so like that applies to social networks, also applies to financial networks. And so maybe one of the most notable examples of that was the launch of PayPal, where you were able to refer your friends. Your friends had some amount of US dollars in their PayPal account, and very famously, PayPal spent a lot of kind of a huge amount of the venture funding. I was, of course, not there, so I don't know how much exactly, but a huge amount of the venture funding to get this network to critical scale with that referral program. And that then led
Mhm.
to network effects, and that then led to this turning into, among many other things, of course, into a successful platform. And so the same applies here. It's just that these crypto networks are valued at billions of dollars if they're somehow working. And so I think we can do something similar just at a much, much larger scale. And so we can use very likely billions of dollars to kind of really get this network to scale. And so that means that everyone that actually joins this network gets a small piece of it through the Worldcoin token. And so you actually receive ownership in the quite literal network. But also, of course, that is an incentive to verify early on, where maybe the utility of the network is not fully there yet because it's subscale. And so that was that idea. And then the second idea is, of course, that like this is going to be one very expensive to build, but then also extremely valuable. It's going to be very valuable to many of the largest internet companies, very likely if we succeed in our mission. And so
Yeah.
we need a business model, but not for us as a company, but for the entire network. And so that is the second piece. I think these tokens actually allow you to build a sustainable network.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think now we're actually bridging that gap where it's actually becoming quite useful. We now announced the partnership with Match,
Mm-hmm.
which is the company behind Tinder, Hinge, many of the dating apps, to actually bring proof of human to these dating platforms. Partnership with Razer, which is one of the largest hardware manufacturers for gaming hardware,
Yeah.
to turn that into the standard for the gaming world. So I think like we're actually getting there now pretty quickly, but of course it's still early.
Can you talk about the scale of bot activity online? I have to imagine a lot of people are interacting with bots daily that they don't necessarily realize are bots, right? There was a high profile issue
Reddit.
recently with Reddit where, somebody was running a scaled influence operation experiment, leveraging the power of AI. And for those that don't know, people were the AI would effectively look back through somebody's comment history and deeply understand the person and then make arguments to them based on their sort of pre-existing beliefs, which is very powerful. And obviously it seems that, all the users were not aware that what was happening to
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
And I just have to imagine that's happening, at a very wide scale.
Yeah, so no one really knows, of course, the actual scale of the situation, but I think the paper that you outlined is from the University of Zurich. So as you described, the University of Zurich actually ran an experiment of changing public opinion by using AIs to respond to just like a comment in subreddits. And they actually have been quite successful in changing the opinion of these subreddits, which is kind of crazy. And so, of course, we have like a similar problem, probably at meaningful scale on X, and very likely now every other social network. Um, maybe uh, so dating also already at a quite a meaningful scale. Like you have these accounts that like have photorealistic images and start texting with you and everything. But I think like maybe the more interesting part is that I think we're like at 1% or something of what I think will happen over the next 24 months. I think a big trigger point will be once you have an open source, very competent agent, because like that's where like things will get quite exponential, and we're like probably more than 90% of almost all activity on the internet, almost all content on the internet will be AI created sometime after. So that will lead to the fact that I think for now, or until quite recently, by default, we trusted everything that we have seen and we assumed that it's like authentic. I think that will completely flip by 180 degrees to by default, we don't trust what we see. We don't trust who we interact with if there is not a way to verify the claim. So it's going to be quite a profound shift.
What was your initial reaction to the Coinbase news, which was this morning? Obviously, very unfortunate, potentially leak of a bunch of personally identifiable information, home addresses, balances, things like that. Is that the kind of thing that in the future could be avoided through utilizing your network, or is that just sort of a reality of finance today?
So my first reaction was that I think it was a very, very strong reaction from Brian.
Yeah.
Huge fan of Brian's, of course, but I think very clear message, very clear next steps, and these things, they are unfortunate, but I think this is like was somewhat, at least from the outside, of course, I don't know the specifics, but it seems like a relatively sophisticated social engineering attack. I don't think what we do will be able to help with something like with customer agent social engineering. Like I think that's a
Yeah.
very specific problem.
But I mean more on the KYC side. Is there a world 10 years from now where somebody is effectively able to KYC using the world network?
Oh yeah, I think that will almost certainly happen.
Yeah,
We
because the issue here was like, somebody has their government ID tied to a home address, tied to a balance, and then that
Hmm.
creates a risk vector,
Yeah.
which is why Coinbase is taking it so seriously.
What about kind of centaur applications of artificial intelligence? So a situation where someone's gaming and they're verifying with the orb or their eyeballs, but they're still using AI. I mean, we've already seen this with a real person who's on a dating app, but they have a second app where they're taking the text, putting it in there, like the Riz GPT,
yeah.
and the responses are still AI generated, but there's just one person involved. Is that less of an issue, this centaur model, because there's still a human in the loop versus there's one person controlling or puppeteering like a million accounts?
Yeah, I think that I think by in a couple of years, I think almost everything we do on the internet we will do with help of an AI because it
Mm-hmm.
will just make our writing better, it will make our thinking clearer. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that is actually not really a problem. I think, and in some sense, the way we actually think about it is we think a lot about agents and agent delegation these days.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, I think one thing how this will be very useful is you will need to understand that behind an agent, or that an agent actually acts on behalf of a human,
Mm-hmm.
or like well, one human. And as you described, I think the the important uh, property of such a system is that you cannot deploy thousands or tens of thousands of these AIs,
Mm-hmm.
not allow you to interact with that. And maybe actually the gaming use case, there's a cool example here where with Razer, they built these gaming um, webcams.
Yeah.
And so when you actually verify for World, you receive a package of data that is not stored anywhere centrally. It's stored on your phone. And one of the things it has is actually a signed face image. And so what Razer will be able to do, it actually will use that to ensure that you're not a deep fake. You're actually the
Mm-hmm.
person you claim to be. And so you can authenticate a live video stream. And I think the same will happen on video calls.
Speaking of hardware, we were just talking about Apple getting into brain computer interfaces. Neuralink is also in the game. Is there a situation where authentication via BCI is as effective, more effective, something that you're partnered with or developing, or is that just on a different timeline from what you see the rollout of superintelligence or AGI being?
Well, so personally, I'm very interested in BCIs,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this is very much on a different timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like to yeah, deployment of invasive or even non-invasive BCIs, I think it's like still certainly 5+ years away, probably 10, 15.
Sure.
So I don't. We will figure it out once it gets there. I would say.
Yeah, yeah. What about? I'm super interested in understanding how the decisions that you're making allow us to read into your AGI timeline, Sam's AGI timelines, and what the future will look like. There's this interesting world where the kind of the revealing feels like you see a future where there are tons of digital AIs in the world, but maybe there's not this super intelligence that can reconstitute matter at a atomic level instantaneously, the gray goo scenario, because in that scenario, even in the good ending, you would imagine that a super intelligence would be able to create a human eyeball, grow it in a lab, do something to create a fake version of the
John
human head,
Coogan.
right? Maybe scan me one way or another and then recreate the eyeball. And so, much like you could potentially fake a fingerprint reader with enough time and effort and detail in how you're constructing that matter, you would think that you'd be able to do that if you had unlimited resources and super intelligence and all these different things, but that doesn't seem to be the timeline that you're operating against. So can you tell me about like how your far future vision for super intelligence plays out a little bit?
So well, I think about these things quite a bit. I think um, so. This kind of also like Ray Kurzweil vision of like eventually we'll
Mm-hmm.
have AI that creates nanobots that will be able to reassemble matter,
Yep.
etc. I think that's that is very likely to happen, but I think as a society, I think we'll like there's going to be a lot of other things that will happen before we get there.
Hmm.
And so I guess my internal mental model is that we are, I think, still at least 10 years away from that kind of level of intelligence, or at least from us allowing that level of intelligence to interact with the real world.
Hmm.
And then actually, if you then think about the fundamentals of kind of physics in such a scenario, is that of course what we do to measure that humanness is we fundamentally use photons
Hmm.
of different wavelengths, so near infrared, visible light, etc. And so I think like before you would actually create an artificial human, such an AI would be able to maybe just emit multispectral wavelengths to fool such a system. And
Sure.
so like, well, but I think then we will also use such a AI to build a countermeasure and build a
Yeah.
more powerful system. So I think that is, in my mind, still far out in the future. I think like all the medical advancements and
Yeah.
um, scientific advancements from AGI, I think
Is
are.
that generally your mental model for how all of this progresses? Is just like good guy with AGI beats bad guy with AGI. It's kind of an economic or energy warfare. Whoever has the more compute, the more, and as long as the good people have more resources, they will be able to build stronger defenses, and so the net outcome is good.
Um, Maybe that's like one way to frame it, but like generally, uh, I think I'm way more optimistic
Hmm.
uh, than kind of most people, or like many people are in the tech world. I think like the default outcome is that these AI systems will just be incredible tools for us, and I think they will
Mm-hmm.
be widely accessible. And I think the the frontier labs will make these accessible to kind of a wide population for quite a long time.
Hmm.
Like that, at some point you might get into kind of this true super intelligence territory where maybe the government steps in. I could
Hmm.
definitely see that happen.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like a geopolitical situation, um, which is going to become like very hard to predict. But I think until then, I think these AI systems will be relatively widely available, and open source will not lag too much behind.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It seems like most of your model is like general optimism about how AGI and AI progresses, but there are pitfalls that need to be avoided, and there's problems that will need to be solved in the interim. And WorldCoin is one instantiation of that one problem to be solved. Are there other problems that you're thinking about that maybe you're not working, but other founders or other entrepreneurs or other companies might be thinking about as we progress into the AGI future?
Well, so first of all, maybe the framing about world, I think you can definitely do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other framing is, as a result of the technology, I think we will create one of, or if not the largest real human network on the internet, which I
So
think
that's
will
just
create a lot
valuable.
of value. So like,
Yeah.
it's like it's not just preventing the bad, it's also creating the good
Yep.
that I think really matters here. Um, other problems for other, there's like so much. It's like
I feel like the main, there's this, um, the world is undoubtedly controversial, right? You have people that are super excited
Mm-hmm.
about the potential of the technology and understand the importance. And then there's maybe people that are excited and understand the importance, but they're still wary.
Yep.
And then there's like the whole other side of people that are just like, no, you're never going to scan, you're never going to get my eyeball. Don't even, keep
I don't
the,
even have pre-check.
yeah, yeah. Those types. But what do you say to the people kind of in the middle that are kind of like interested but kind of wary or maybe on the fence? When you're talking to them one on one.
Um, I think like we have very, very high conviction around both the importance of this technology and how the technology is built. Like I think it has all the properties that we will need as a society for such technology, in that sense that it's anonymous, it is scalable, it can be inclusive. Like all of those things I think will end up mattering a lot. Like maybe much more than is kind of visceral at that point in time. But I think in the next 12, 24 months, I think it will become relatively obvious. And so I think um, it's going to be interesting where like I think different parts of the world will end up with different trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe some parts of the world will just require government IDs on pretty much every part of the internet. And I think that might end up being a really bad situation.
Hmm.
And that's bad because somebody would just effectively sell their ID to be rented out for
No,
It's like
because like
authoritarian.
ultimately, it will be really hard to build that as a not traceable system
Mm.
by the government, and I think like it's of course something we really believe in here in the US is like the freedom.
Yeah, so the government would track you on every single place you
Well,
go on the internet,
they
every web
could,
page. They
they
could in
definitely
theory.
could.
Yeah,
I'm not saying they would, and I think it really depends on which part of the world you're in.
sure.
But I think that's just not a great outcome. And so I
Yeah,
think like if we do if we do everything in the right way over the next couple of years, I hope that our brand will become something like the Signal Messenger, where like I think
totally.
this is like the anonymous high trust solution that you can use. And other people will have other solutions. I think there will be a lot of competition around that space because I think it will become a relatively big one. Um, so yeah, if others will want to use other options, that is totally great. I think we will win by building the best product and reaching the most scale.
Jordy?
great
Yes.
place to end.
Yeah, this was
This was
fantastic.
fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Very excited to see the rollout. I actually did. I'm just remembering I had one last question. Are you far enough along as you would like to be, or do you wish you could just sort of like pause time and scale the WorldCoin network, just for another year to sort of catch up? Because again, when you talk about these timelines around 12 months, 24 months, you guys are really racing against the clock, from what it sounds like, for a world in which we have these sort of agentic reasoning systems that will really
Yeah.
make the internet a much more wild place.
Well, I think that is definitely one perspective in my mind is like I think we're definitely in a race against time. And what is interesting, what really only happened in the last 6 months is that CEOs of many of the very large companies that with large products, um, well, either we talked to them or they reached out, and the problem is like currently we cannot serve that scale. So there's like a lot of pull for the product to be available, and we just really need to get there. We need to roll this out faster and be able to serve these big platforms. So that I think that is like a extreme level of urgency for one, but then the other side is it's hard to describe how crazy it feels to be even here from the beginning of the company. Like for like the first 2 to 3 years, well, people basically just made fun of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and so like yeah, it's certainly personally the journey of a lifetime. And like when I started working this, like I gave it a very low probability of success. And I did so for the first 3 years or something. And so like yeah, still very, very long to go and fast to scale. But on the other hand, it feels pretty wild to just be here right now.
Amazing.
On the social network thing, sorry, last question.
We're like, all right, thanks, Alex. Thanks for coming on.
I mean, when you say large scale network valuable, are we talking Visa network or are we talking Instagram?
Because you're gonna see. Probably
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see the business model, the pricing model. Are the big platforms going to be paying in WorldCoin? Are they going to be holding? Are we going to have a national reserve of this stuff? I don't know. We'll have to try. We'll have to have you back on when there's a big announcement.
Looking forward to that. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Yeah,
Cheers.
fantastic.
Thanks,
We'll talk
Alex.
to you soon.